Apologies for absence or members away on official council business. I'm aware that Councillor Dervix is unable to join us, and so I'll submit his apologies. Does anyone else have any other apologies that you would like to advise us of? No, that's fine. So we'll carry on. Members, if I could just remind you all to mute your telephone when you do not wish to speak, and I can see that you're almost all muted now. And after you've spoken, if you could press the lower hand button, that would certainly help us to be as efficient as possible. Agenda item number 2 is disclosable pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Does anyone have any interests that you'd like to disclose? If not, we'll move on to agenda item 3, which is the minutes of the meetings of the board held on the 2nd of March, 20th July and 19th August. Members, you're all aware that those have already been adopted by full council, and unless anyone has any corrections to raise at this stage, I'll sign them after the meeting. Does anyone have any issues to raise on the minutes? Thank you, members. We'll now move on to agenda item number 4, which is the budgetary control report for the period ending 31st of August. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope members have read the report. If they've got any questions, I'll do my best to answer them, or if there are any matters that I need to take back to the director, then I'll do so, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Members, any comments or questions on the report? If not, I'll propose that we adopt it. Could I have a seconder, please?
Second, Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Councillor Jarvis. We'll now move to the vote. Mr. Tobin.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bell.
For.
Councillor Clues.
For.
Councillor Deakin. Councillor Deakin.
Don't think he's with us.
So, sorry, Chairman, there's a message from Councillor Deakin in the text to say he's unwell.
In that case, members, are you all happy to accept Councillor Deakin's apologies that I missed? I'll take that as a yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Downs.
For.
Councillor Hayfield.
For.
Councillor Humphreys.
For.
Councillor Jarvis. Councillor Jarvis.
Councillor Jarvis.
Sorry, was muted. For.
Councillor Lees.
For.
Councillor MacDonald.
For.
Councillor Mawson.
For.
Councillor Moss.
For.
Councillor Parsons.
For.
Councillor Phillips.
For.
Councillor Simpson.
For.
Thank you, Chair. Unanimous.
Thank you very much. Members, we'll move rapidly on to the planning and development applications. The first one is a consultation for land between the A452 and A446 Chester Road and Stonebridge Road. Mr. Brown.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members will recognise this from a previous report when the original application was reported to us under a consultation procedure from Solihull for these major roadworks in connection with HS2 in order to provide access into the station. Let me just go through the slides so that I can remind members where we are. If I take the top slide first, in this particular case, north is on the left-hand side, reversely, and south is down here. The A452, which runs from the M6 down to Stonebridge, runs across the top here, and the edge of Chelmsley Wood is over here. The members will probably be familiar with the road that comes off the 452, the 446, crosses the motorway here, and comes down to the NEC down here. So this is the line of the HS2 with the new station down here, and the complete road rearrangements, as you can see, that were approved last time through. The application we've got at the moment is just to vary the works to the big roundabout. Sorry about the colours, Mr. Chairman, but this is what the plan that came to us. The original proposal was to have a 3-lane roundabout. The current variation is to enable land to be included to provide 4 lanes should it be required. So from the diagram, you may see 3 lanes in some areas, but there's sufficient area of land to accommodate a 4th lane, such as over here, should the application be approved.
Excuse me, Chair, I can't see that on my screen. Can everybody else see it?
Yes, I can.
Councillor
Yeah, I
Jarvis, I
certainly can.
can.
Yes, I can see it, yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
carry
I
on.
can see it.
Sorry.
Okay, I'll carry on. I'll take it off the screen now. So as I said, the variation is just to those roundabouts, that roundabout. There will be implications as far as North Warwickshire is concerned, because the whole of that roundabout is in Solihull. It's very minor consequences in terms of North Warwickshire, in that the existing access points into Melbeck Nurseries and to the Courts Point Business Centre will be slightly readjusted. So for those reasons, Mr. Chairman, as before, we're recommending that there be no objection be forwarded to Solihull, but the same representations that we made before, in other words, in terms of as much landscaping and mitigation as they can achieve, be included in the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Members, for the avoidance of any doubt, the previous consultation response is attached in your papers at Appendix B, which is on page 511. I'd like to propose that we amend that slightly to make a reference that the development and all subsequent developments associated with UK Central and with the HS2 works have some further mitigation measures to avoid rat running and other congestion issues for local villagers. Who else would like to speak? Who has anything else you'd like to add? If not, members, I'll propose the motion as amended. Could I have a seconder?
Seconded, Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Councillor Jarvis. Does anyone else wish to speak? If not, we'll go straight to the vote. Mr. Tobin.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bell.
Just for clarity, Mr. Tobin, voting on the amended vote. Mr. Tobin.
Yes, Councillor Bell.
So I'm voting on the amended motion as put forward by the chairman. Yes.
Yes, that's the vote being taken.
4, please.
Thank you. Councillor Clues.
4.
Councillor Downs.
4.
Councillor Hayfield.
4.
Councillor Humphreys.
4.
Councillor Jarvis.
4.
Councillor Lees.
4.
Councillor MacDonald.
4.
Councillor Mawson.
4.
Councillor Moss.
4.
Councillor Parsons,
4.
Councillor Phillips,
4.
Councillor Simpson,
You're muted.
Sorry, everyone, but my age, I'm muted again. So thank you very much. That was carried. We now move on to application number 686 for Kingsbury Hall at Coventry Road, Kingsbury. Mr. Brown.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application was reported to you some time ago, as you can see from the report. And during that particular time, and the time period since that report, there have been various meetings between officers and the applicant in order, as you can see, to clarify the extent of the proposal and, more importantly, to explore the nature of the link between the new development and the hall itself. As a consequence of those meetings, the applicant has prepared an addendum, an additional planning statement, which is attached to your report. And I believe, Mr. Chairman, because of the involvement of members in those meetings, you wanted this particular report to come to you, to come to the board, so that members could be made fully aware of the content of those particular meetings. If I can just run through a couple of reminders. If I can move on. Right. To remind members, most members will know where Kingsbury Hall is over here, the centre of Kingsbury, with the road system coming down through here. The church is down here. And then the access into the Kingsbury Hall here with the River Tame overlooking the water park over here on the left-hand side. Members will be aware that the applicant has now acquired the additional land here to the north of the hall, and that is where the new development is to take place as described in the report, with the Kingsbury Hall being retained as a community centre for that development, together with some further demolition of the barns in this area, and again the use of some of the existing barns for community uses. Members can see here the wall, which is part and parcel of the Kingsbury heritage asset. And the applicant has provided a couple of visuals for you. This is obviously from the looking from the water parks, up the path coming over here to the bridge over the River Tame, the church, Kingsbury Hall, and the development set back. And then the second image, again closer to the River Tame here, for the hall, and the extent of the development back here. This being the high dependency unit, and this being some of the other family independent living accommodation which is to be provided. So, Mr. Chairman, as you're aware, you asked for this to come to planning board so that members could air their views before, so they could be taken into account before we actually look at the determination report.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Members, Councillor Andy Jens, as well, the local members, has advised that he would like to speak. Councillor Jens.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just very briefly speak to support the recommendation of a further site visit. This is potentially a very significant application for North Warwickshire and particularly for Kingsbury. And I think it's very important that members familiarise themselves with the sites as much as they possibly can. I'm afraid I was away last time you did a site visit, but if there is another one, I would welcome the opportunity to join that, if that's okay. That's all I want to say at the moment, just that I support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jens. Members, who else would like to speak? Councillor Phillips.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's I'm concerned about this particular item, but as it's down for a site visit, I'd like to just second the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Councillor Moss.
Chairman, I'm not happy about it in its current form. It's the extra 6.5 acres of green belt. I mean, yes, the hall's nice and it's been done up nicely and people are impressed and have commented on it. At a recent meeting, the applicant said that he'd been at the public meeting held in the Methodist Church and lots of previous occupants of the hall had come along. I don't believe any previous occupants of the hall are alive. But anyway, there you go. It's, I can remember when we were talking 1.5 million. Now we're talking 7 million. I won't prejudge how I shall vote when it comes finally to committee. I'm certainly in favour of a site visit. The last time I went, Councillor LeBrun failed to drag me up over the threshold of that very large doorstep, but I'm sure I shall manage that, because so I didn't see inside of what had been or what happened. I didn't realise it wasn't considerably restored inside. Anyway, that's sufficient for me, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Would anyone else like to speak? If not, we've had a proposer and a seconder that we go for a site visit. So, Mr. Tobin.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bell.
For.
Councillor Clues.
For.
Councillor Downs.
For.
Councillor Hayfield.
For.
Councillor Humphreys.
For.
Councillor Jarvis.
For.
Councillor Lees.
For.
Councillor MacDonald.
For.
Councillor Mawson.
For.
Councillor Moss.
For.
Councillor Parsons.
For.
Councillor Phillips.
For.
And Councillor Simpson.
For.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, members. That was unanimous. We now move on to application number 755 for land to the east of the former Tamworth Golf Course. Mr. Brown.
As previously, Mr. Chairman, this is a report to update members as to where we are on this substantial application. And as you can see from the report, matters are coming together, and there are some issues in the report which members may wish to comment on. Before we get there, do we just remind members of the proposal? If I go the right way. I've only got the one slide, Mr. Chairman, which is the actual illustration master plan, so as members can see where they are. Polesworth is down here, and this is the B5000 that comes up into Tamworth. The motorway M42 being here. The site of the former Tamworth Golf Course, so the white areas over here, where there is now residential development being undertaken, moving down here, and eventually the whole of that area there will become residential development. The boundary with Tamworth runs down here. The karting track, the Daytona karting track, is here, and Roby's Lane itself runs up through here to the canal, which is here, the marina at Alvcote, and then the village of Alvcote here. In order that members can see how the site is divided, then this portion of the site is allocated in the emerging local plan, and this phase 1 site, or phase 1 of the development, is being proposed, is presently identified as being in the meaningful gap. The report refers to Alvcote Wood, and that is here. In terms of the accesses into the site, then there are two. A new roundabout here on the B5000, opposite Chilton Road, which is here, and signalised junction, a new signalised junction at the junction of Roby's Lane with the B5000. This extent of Roby's Lane would become pedestrianised and also used for cycleways. The access would come up to here, and then, as you can see, the access then would go into this particular phase of the development, and Roby's Lane would continue up here without any further access from this part of the development onto Roby's Lane.
Jeff, can I just say, Councillor Parsons here, I didn't get any of the indications that you were talking about there. I don't know if anybody else did, but when you were saying here and whatever, nothing appeared on my map at all.
Okay, that's the cursor. Are other members having other members having difficulty as well?
Yeah, yes, that's correct. I put a message on the board saying there was just a black screen. We never saw anything.
Right.
Sorry, Jeff.
I saw it, Jeff.
Thanks for letting us know.
You say to the
I certainly saw
contrary,
it.
Councillor Jarvis, I saw it.
Right. I saw the map, but no cursor.
Okay, if members saw the plan, that's the important thing. Can I just go back to the plan? Some members can't see the cursor at all.
No, I couldn't see it at all, Jeff.
Now, sorry, now I can see it. Yes. Okay.
So can you just move it back into the green bit, Jeff? Sorry, Mr. Brown. So is that still not there, Councillor Parsons?
It's not for me, but I mean, if it's, I do know the site reasonably well anyway. But yeah.
Okay.
We'll try and give you a call to see if we can fix that, Councillor Parsons.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a great worry, but
Okay.
for those councillors who don't know it quite so well, if they're not getting the cursor, it could be a problem. Yeah.
Can I just check, is anybody else not able to see the cursor?
I've got a black screen again, but I'm looking at the papers.
Okay.
I'm sorry about this, members. We will try and fix the IT issue. But if
Okay.
in the meantime, Mr. Brown.
The important thing, Mr. Chairman, I think, is to see the master plan, and you can see there the extent of the development and the two access points, which are numbered 1 and 2 at the bottom end of the site there. If I go back to the report itself, Mr. Chairman, there are several issues there which are arising from the various conversations that we've had with consultation agencies, and I've gone through those in the report. I don't intend to go through those now, but I'll ask members to comment on any of the issues that I've raised there. We will take those forward and then have further update meetings as and when required. I'll leave it there, Mr. Chairman, if members for members to come back and comment.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Councillors Moss and Parsons, I have both of you as indicating to speak. Is that for this item or the previous one?
Sorry, Chairman, it's a spillover from previous. I'll cancel it. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you. Councillor Parsons?
Yes, I did want to speak on this item.
Okay, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I've got a number of concerns about this development, and I appreciate it's outline planning at the moment. It's it does seem to be moving ahead, as it were, with its own momentum. I'm deeply disturbed at the reduction of affordable housing down from 40% to 20%, and that seems to be, well, for me, that's a real issue, and I think it is for the locality. The traffic plans, I know there is huge concern in the village of Shuttington, which believe the villagers there believe that they're already almost gridlocked village at times is going to get far worse as people head from this development to the Ashby Road and the Junction 11 development, which is huge. We've got huge concerns in Polesworth that the traffic plans seem to indicate that everybody coming out of this will go straight to the A5 via Stony Delph and Marlborough Way, which seems unlikely to us in that sense. I think a great deal of this traffic will come through Polesworth, heading for the A5 further down, and we have got grave concerns. The other thing is that I don't know, there's been talk of a working group. I don't know whether that working group is meeting, but currently there are no councillors from Polesworth on this working group, and that, considering the locality, if there is a working group meeting, that is a very real omission. and needs to be addressed, I believe. And finally, of course, there is the issue of the meaningful gap, which is meaningful to a lot of people in Polesworth and that sort of vicinity. I mean, it's obviously being christened the meaningless gap in local parlance, but you know, there is a desire for that separation between Tamworth and Polesworth to be maintained, essentially. So those are my points, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. I'll ask Mr. Brown to respond to all the member questions at the same time. That's okay. I would just comment at this stage on the working party. That was agreed to be established by the LDF committee rather than the planning board. So it's not something that I can necessarily help you with, but that's chaired by Councillor Wiley, and I think the opposition spokesman is Councillor Jackie Chambers. So I'm sure between them they'll be setting up meetings of the working groups for all of the development sites, and perhaps if you could raise that issue with them as far as representation is concerned. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wanted to bring up about infrastructure. I believe that the first phase, when it happens, is going to be bringing up the first 250 houses being occupied before they build the new primary school. I would like to point out at the moment that some of the primary schools in the area now are inundated with children at the moment with what we've got, and we've already got the pre-build that's taking place in other areas close to these primary schools. So I wonder if Mr. Brown can help us with how we can actually try and get stuff done beforehand. I'd hate to see 250 houses occupied before they even put a spade in the ground. So there'll be 500 houses before they actually get a school going. So I am very, very concerned about school. And I already know that children are being taken from Wharton to Newton Regis and Ostrey to be able to go to school at the primary level. And we already know at the moment that children are being bussed out to other areas who can't go to the senior school at Polesworth. So although I do understand that within the infrastructure, there's £8.5 million set aside for future development, infrastructure development programme, and then potentially £20 million from the Section 106, the phasing of which will probably mean that we're going to be on the back foot forever. Is there anything he can say to help us push this forward so that we're supporting people front end rather than trying to support people trying to get them into places? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Mawson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share Councillor Parsons' fears about this development. Though I live in Dordon, I know for a fact is that most of them will be coming up Dickie's Hill and through Polesworth into Dordon, Long Street again, which we're already blocked out with traffic at the moment. And I'm afraid also to do with what's the name, the building on the meaningful gap, as we used to call it, the area of restraint years ago. That worries me because once they've got the foot in the door, they'll start building on the rest. Them are my concerns.
Thank you, Councillor Mawson. Councillor Phillips.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo all the previous speakers. I don't disagree with anything that's been said, especially taking up Councillor Parsons' view. I mean, I'm concerned about the reduction in affordable houses, especially when you consider, that they wanted to take part of our meaningful gap, as we keep trying to defend this meaningful gap, but nobody seems to want to recognise it, only us. I am concerned also. I mean, I sympathise with the people in Dordon and Polesworth with the traffic run, but I think this particular construction will have a wider problem, make wider problems, especially villages like ours, which are already rat runs for people trying to miss Junction 10. Coming down Bolter's Lane. Bolter's Lane used to be a lane. Now it's almost an A road. I really am concerned. It's not just Wood End. It's the wider area. I think that we need to be looking at as yeah, we talked about the infrastructure. We need to be looking at this before this really gets into swing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Councillor Parsons, did you want to speak again, or was that from before?
No. Sorry, Chair, I forgot to take my hand down. Sorry.
No problem. I just didn't want to not ask you to speak if you wanted to.
No, that was very good of you. Thank you.
And Councillor Hayfield.
A question I've asked before, but I'll ask again to try and get an update. Given the proximity of this proposed development to Tamworth and our concern about infrastructure, how well are we actually liaising with, in any meaningful way, with Tamworth over how we ensure that the infrastructure, from what will be, to all intents and purposes of residents living there, effectively feeling like a suburb of Tamworth, even though it's in North Warwickshire, how are we going to reassure ourselves that we are having meaningful discussions with Tamworth on this? An update, please.
Thank you, Councillor Hayfield. Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Humphreys, did you want to speak?
Yeah, very sorry, I was muted then. I said thank you very much for letting me speak again. What I was very concerned about also is I know we can only look at what's in front of us. There seems to be no taking into account what's happening. Go out onto the Ashby Road, which is if you come out through Shuttington, when they come out through past the Pretty Pigs, up through Shuttington, onto the Ashby Road. Arkle Estates just started, 3,000 homes for Lichfield. They've already got just on the left-hand side as you're going off the Ashby Road, there's 750 houses going into there. They're all going to be falling onto those roads. And I also would like to ask the question of, although the highways have looked at this estate and looked at their bits and pieces, have they actually looked at the accumulative effect of what's going to be close to 5,500 houses within a 3-mile circle? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it is a genuine hand up this time. Yeah, I'm concerned that this development could be sort of portrayed as simply a suburb of Tamworth. You know, it is very close to Shuttington. It is very close to Polesworth. And actually, it is not just a suburb of Tamworth. It's very much connected to Polesworth and Shuttington and indeed Dore. And this is... you know, the implications are going to be on the structure too, and it's going to have grave effects on these places. It's not just a Tamworth issue at all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we've got someone speaking on the line perhaps who shouldn't. They certainly sound a little bit too young to be an elected member. Mr. Brown.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just run through several of the points that that members have raised? First of all, on affordable housing, then clearly, as indicated in the report, the applicant is indicating that he is suggesting that there will be a reduction from the 40% provision which policy requires. However, if the second half of that paragraph in the report refers to the fact that he'll be doing a viability appraisal. And that will go to the district valuer. And as members know, when the district valuer's report comes back, there are questions to be asked about the viability, and that affordable housing figure may change as a result of that. Members maybe have to look at priorities in terms of 106 contributions as part and parcel of that viability appraisal. It means that if affordable housing perhaps is increased, then some of the other contributions may in fact need to fall away. So we will report back on that, Mr. Chairman, when we receive the applicant's viability appraisal, and members then be appraised of it via the district valuer's comments on it. So members will have a chance to look at that at a later stage. In terms of the highway issues, then clearly the 3 highway authorities have worked together, and they have each said no objection, and they've used the same modelling for the likely traffic generation from this particular site. However, as the report indicates, there are issues which we have raised with the County Council, the Warwickshire County Council, as a consequence of their response. Those are outlined on 5121, and the very first of those is the one that members have alluded to. In other words, the perceived underestimation of traffic from this site going northwards. I'm particularly in that paragraph. We have referred the county to Junction 11, to the other developments in Tamworth and Lichfield that have been approved, and to the existing use of that road to get to the A453 and Junction 11. The Highway Authority have acknowledged receipt of that comment and said they will look into it. So again, Mr. Chairman, I'll have to report back to you as and when that comes through. Clearly, the factors mentioned about Tamworth and Dordon, particularly Dordon, with traffic going south to the A5 rather than going through Long Street rather than Marlborough Way and Tamworth, I can raise that issue, Mr. Chairman, with the County Council as an additional point. That's not a problem. They have 3 or 4 points to look at anyway, and I can ask them to review that. In terms of infrastructure, then, as you can see, the education and health authorities have agreed. And to answer the comment about coordination with Tamworth and Staffordshire, these infrastructure requirements from the education and health authorities have been agreed between the 2 county councils. They've got statements of common ground, and they agree on the provision. In terms of the schooling, then clearly a primary school will be in the first phase of the development, and I believe that's to be triggered in around about 150 houses, not the 250 which Councillor Humphreys was talking about. Now that, as you can see from the report, Mr. Chairman, will be taken up because planning conditions or a 106, section 106, can actually put time periods and triggers as to when that primary school takes place. It's likely that we will be saying there'll be no further occupation of any house after 150 or 200 unless that school is actually provided. So to answer the point about Councillor Humphrey's point about the provision, we can actually make sure through the triggers and the 106 conditions and obligations that does take place in the first phase. However, the key issue is not necessarily building the school, it's resourcing it. And that's the factor which has been mentioned in the report, in my report, which I've go back to the County Council on, to ensure that there are teachers available and it's properly resourced when it becomes available from after construction. Finally, with reference to Tamworth, then clearly Tamworth Borough members have been involved in a couple of presentations with us and the developer on the scheme. And the very original recommendation from the board was that they be fully involved as we go through this particular planning application. At the present time, you can see from the report that I've asked for comments from members on this position where we are at the present time, and there still needs to be some clarification on that. Once that has been achieved, then we will start negotiating with Tamworth officers on the issues which are raised in the report, and also involve Tamworth members and our members in a further meeting. The report basically, the recommendation, Mr. Chairman, indicates that that further reports will be brought to you. And now that we're going through this process, they will be far more regular than they have been up to present time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Would any of the members wish to speak or make any further comments? Just to follow on, Councillor Parsons, from your earlier comment, we would ordinarily try for a large application such as this to have a more informal working group where local members and the applicant meet together. I'm very happy to try and arrange that. I just don't want to create a confusion between what we'd ordinarily do in a planning context, and Councillor Verps and I would normally see applicants to monitor progress and to go along with big developments. But to create a conflict between that and the working parties that I know the LDF are trying to set up. If you leave that with me, I'll follow up with forward planning to see where they are in terms of setting those up. And if that's not going to happen immediately, then we'll probably just have a meeting between ourselves and the developer and invite interested members along. But I'll get back to you on that shortly. Councillor Parsons.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That seems a very good way to proceed, and yeah, very happy with that. Just one point for Jeff, really. You mentioned traffic heading south to the A5 going through Dorman, but it will also continue along the B5000 to Pinnell, which is already a very significant pinch point, and it will come through Polesworth. So when looking at that issue, can we make sure that that we do look at the issue of the traffic coming through Polesworth along the B5000 and heading to the A5? You know, from the various points there, Spon Lane is one, for example.
That's understood, Mr. Chairman. I can follow that through. Not a problem.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak so often. Thank you.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Members, if no one else wishes to speak, we'll move to a vote on the recommendation. I'll propose it. Can we have a seconder to note the report?
Councillor Humphreys, I second it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tobin.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bell.
4.
Councillor Clues.
4.
Councillor Downs.
4.
Councillor Hayfield.
4.
Councillor Humphreys.
4.
Councillor Jarvis.
4.
Councillor Lees.
4.
Councillor MacDonald.
4.
Councillor Mawson.
4.
Councillor Moss.
4.
Councillor Parsons.
I think I'd like to register an abstention at this point. Thank you.
Councillor Phillips.
4.
Councillor Simpson.
4. Thank you, members. That's carried. We now move on to application number 20 for land to the northwest of Newton Regis Village Hall. We have 2 speakers, members, the first of whom is Diane Radbourne. Ms. Radbourne, if you could stand by, and we'll invite you to speak as soon as Mr. Brown has introduced his report. Mr. Brown.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application has been to you a couple of times now. It was deferred last time for a site visit, and that took place about a month ago. I've just updated the report so that members can see where we are as a result of that. Just so that members, can I just move on from the plans so that members can remind themselves of the plans as to where we are. The application site there is outlined in red, next door to the village hall, with access onto Ostry Lane, which is in the centre of that particular plan. An illustration of the layout, a simple cul-de-sac with a bit more detail on the access, and then finally more detail of the access itself. And members that were on the site visit particularly looked at the visibility of the junction onto Ostry Lane here, and also the existing access at number 16, which has been referred to several times. I've got nothing further to add to the report, Mr. Chairman. It's a matter now for determination.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Ms. Radbourne, welcome to the meeting.
Good evening.
Good evening. Mr. Tobin.
Good evening, Ms. Radbourne. You'll be allowed 3 minutes to address the board. In a moment, I'll tell you when that time starts, and then I'll also give you a reminder when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your time starts now.
Our objections to this application remain largely the same, being that the proposed houses lie outside of the development boundary. The applicant has said that development boundaries are out of date and carry no weight. However, until the current guidelines are replaced, they still have to afford at least some weight in planning decisions and in the protection of small settlements. The 5-year plan and 20% buffer has already been fulfilled. However, the applicant has stated that the court strategy refers to minimum housing numbers, not maximum. The applicant has recently been granted permission to build 21 houses on Manor Farm. Previously, they stated that this development is independent from Manor Farm. However, they are now saying that when coupled with Manor Farm development, a range of housing will be provided. If it is coupled with Manor Farm, should it not have been included in that application? If it is independent of Manor Farm, then the applicant has still not provided any justifiable need to build a further 9 executive houses outside of the development boundary. And if permission is granted, once they are given a foot in the door, there could be another 9 houses and then another, and so on. The recent planning approvals have already increased the housing in the village by 20%. As you are aware, this is a small village with no shop, limited public transport and a pop-up post office for 2 hours once a week. The recent planning permissions will already considerably increase the amount of vehicles in the village, and this development will just add to that number. There is still an issue with the loss of amenities to the local residents, with overlooking, overshadowing and loss of privacy. My own home will have 3 houses running the full length of my garden, with 2 double garages very close to the boundary. It will be very oppressive. We still have serious concerns over the road safety, particularly with the junction being on the bend. The school bus is one example. The applicant has stated
1 minute remaining.
the bus currently reverses into the car park. It does not reverse into the car park. It is able to drive safely forward and then turn round. We question whether the bus will have room to safely enter and exit the village hall car park through the new entrance. If not, it will have to reverse on a dangerous junction, the times of day when there is increased traffic and pedestrians. In conclusion, we believe this development, if granted permission, will bring significant harm to the local residents' amenities, to the sustainability of the village, to the protection of the development boundary and to road safety. The applicant has not provided any justifiable need for these executive houses to be built outside of the settlement boundary. It will not add any benefit to the village. So we respectfully ask the committee to refuse permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Radburn. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? If not, Mr. Radburn, thank you very much indeed. Our next speaker is Mr. Will Brearley. Mr. Brearley, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you.
Mr. Tobin.
Good evening, Mr. Brearley. As for the last speaker, you'll have 3 minutes to address the board. I'll tell you in a moment when your time starts, and I shall also tell you when you have 1 minute remaining. Your time starts now.
Thank you and good evening. I hope members found their site visit helpful and that the context of the site and its relationship with the village school and the village hall is better understood. I reviewed my notes from the August committee and will focus on the main issues that were raised by some of the members at that time. These were namely that the site lies outside the village boundary, that there has been too much growth in the villages across the borough, and that doubts remained about the impact of school traffic. On the first issue, there are currently no defined settlement boundaries within the borough, with 3 recent appeal decisions, including one recovered by the Secretary of State, confirming as such. Therefore, and respectfully, the location of the site on the edge of, but outside of the now lapsed settlement boundary is not a consideration that can hold significant weight at this time. Whilst it is relevant, what is relevant rather, is the section of the policy that sets out the broad distribution of growth across the borough. And that brings me to the second issue about past growth in the villages, but specifically Newton Regis. The cumulative growth in the village since the core strategy was adopted, including this current proposal for 9 homes, is 35 dwellings. And that would represent a 5% growth, which is considered to be a level of growth that is capable of being absorbed into the community and environment without harm. It is also of such a low number so as not to undermine the council's spatial strategy. On these 2 points, it's worth highlighting that the council approved, as has been mentioned, the development at Manor Farm recently in the same policy context. That site similarly lay outside but adjacent to a settlement boundary that had lapsed. The council allowed that development at a time when officers were not attaching weight to the emerging local plan, and so the emerging allocation at Manor Farm held no weight. In short, the council are asked to consider the need for consistency in decision making, particularly given the very short gap between the decision at Manor Farm and its current application. In respect of the school traffic, clearly locally, as has been voiced at the last committee in August and again today, this is an existing situation. But it is one that the proposed development, in our view, does not make worse. No objections have been raised, for example, by Warwickshire County Council. No other harm has been identified, and the layout, I would remind members, that is illustrative and is reserved for the reserved matter stage. So no harm is identified. So on that basis, I would ask that members support the recommendation and approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brearley. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? Councillor Lees.
I've got a question. These 9 dwellings are going on to agricultural land. Can you tell me what's to stop the developer, once he's on that land, to take the rest of the field for developing? That's one of my main concerns. Thank you.
And the applications for 9 dwellings, it's not the applicant's intention to propose any more. The Thorpe estate of a long history within the area and within Newton Regis, and have built many homes over many years within the village. There is a relationship there that the family, the estate, want to maintain. I appreciate that is a word. There's no sort of legally binding commitments on that, but ultimately the limits to growth would be established through an application, so members would have a say at that point. All I can say is what my client has told me, what the family have told me, is that there is no intention to build any more at this moment. There is a need for the family, as you can imagine, over at the estate. There lots of historic large buildings and lots of land to maintain with limited revenue. So there is, or are, occasions over history and over time where they need to look at their estate to bring in a revenue so that can fund and retain the estate in one ownership. So I can't promise you that in 10, 20, 30 years time another application would be made to the authority. All I can say to you is that what I've been told is that there is no intention to make any further applications in Newton Regis.
Thank you, Mr. Brearley. Councillor Humphreys. Did you have a question, Councillor Humphreys, or is that for later?
Yes, sorry, I have got a question. And I know the Manor Farm development is a separate issue, but originally that was for 40 houses. But the one thing it was on brownfield site. So, but now it appears that both these groups of houses are being considered as one. And I wonder if Mr. Brearley could comment on the fact that if it is considered as one, then we'd be talking about 21 houses and another 9 houses. And a similar situation happened in Austria, where a group of houses were then sort of put together rather than separate developments. And I wonder if this could really be considered as one major development.
Thank you. I mean, they are 2 separate developments. My comment about considering them as one really relates to, I suppose, the housing mix. And I mean, I come at it from the angle as an authority when planning for housing mix, housing sizes across the borough. They look for a varied mix depending on their needs historically and whatnot. And that's set out within normally the SHMAR, the Strategic Housing Market Availability Assessment. So when I've commented about the 2 being seen together, what I'm saying is that the 2 deliver a housing mix, a varied housing mix between 2, 3, 4 beds, possibly 5 beds. And I think when I look at it, I look at the village in a broader mix and on what that can contribute to the community. But they are 2 applications, the same applicant, but 2 different sites, one determined, one not. So that's the context of how I've looked at it. And sorry if there's any confusion.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any other questions for our speaker? In which case, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Brearley.
Thank you.
Members, we now move on to discussing the application. Councillor Humphreys.
Well, I do have an issue with this because, first of all, and I give weight to the fact that the development boundaries must be considered, because otherwise there'd be a free fall. And I would imagine or believe that the reason there's only 9 houses, that reduces any other commitments, because if there was 20 houses, then there would be more money have to come back to the village. So I do have a concern about 9 houses being piecemeal, followed by 9 houses, keep it under 10 all the time, or whatever the number comes in the NPPF as it moves forward. So as far as I can see, you must take into that consideration. You know, there have been several planning applications over a period of time, since 2017 up until last year, which have put another 10 or 12 houses, with 6 others currently being sorted amongst, which, you know, puts the development with this 21 and this next 9, we'll be into well over 40 houses by there, and the growth in the village will be exponential in terms of that the village could support. So I do believe we have the wrong too many houses. The development boundary is not very good. There is a 6-year housing supply already, so we're chasing the holy grail again of building houses. And I am very concerned. Road safety is a major issue. We had fire brigade, etc. That could happen at any time, I do realise, but it is a very, very dangerous corner. It will have an impact on the residents of people there, and so I'm unable to support it. And I believe, actually, we could play. I would move a refusal based on NW10 and NW12, and I would propose to put that forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Phillips.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I too can't support this, and I'm quite prepared to second Councillor Humphrey's proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the referring to the 2 developments for the mix of housing. Well, either we're talking about 2 developments or we're talking about 1 development, and we appear to be talking about 1 development. I don't see how this development fulfills the need in the village. It's an executive development. There's no attempt to put anything other than that there, and as such, in terms of this development, I don't think the mix is acceptable, and I don't think this is a terribly good development, moving outside of the boundary of the village and extending it that way. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, anything to add?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. So, would any other members wish to speak? I'm presuming that Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Phillips and Councillor Parsons have already spoken, but if you'd like to speak again, let me know. If that's the case, we've had a proposal for refusal based on policies NW12 and NW10. I'd move to the vote. Councillor Humphreys, sorry, did you wish to speak?
No, I forgot to remove my hand. Thank you.
No problem. So if there are no other proposals, no other speakers, I'd like to take a vote on refusal. Mr. Tobin.
So, Chair, this is a vote on refusal on the basis of Councillor Humphreys' proposals of policies NW10 and NW12. Councillor Bell.
For.
Councillor Clues.
For.
Councillor Downs.
For.
Councillor Hayfield.
For.
Councillor Humphreys.
For.
Councillor Jarvis.
For.
Councillor Lees.
For.
Councillor MacDonald.
For.
Councillor Mawson.
For.
Councillor Moss.
For.
Councillor Parsons.
For.
Councillor Phillips.
For.
Councillor Simpson.
For. Members, that sounds unanimous to me, so planning permission is refused. We now move to application number 215 for 42 Austrey Road. Mr. Brown.
Again, Mr. Chairman, this is a deferral from last time, and members were asked to make their own visit to this particular site. Just to bring members up to date in terms of the plans, so that you can remind yourselves where we are. This is in the centre of Warden, as you can see here. North is at the top, and the site is here. There's an existing small garage which has been used as a repair workshop, as you can see. This is the elevation facing the road down here with the existing parking arrangements. Then a series of photographs which are replicated from the committee report. Members that went on the site visit will recognise these. The bottom left is the front elevation. And then we have the proposal for the 1.5 bedroom conversion here, as members can see, with the 2 car parking spaces. I've got nothing further to add to the report, Mr. Chairman, because it's the bulk of the planning arguments are contained in the initial report in the appendix.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. Members who would like to begin discussion on this application? Councillor Humphreys.
I'm unable to support this. I know this building needs to have something done with it, but it has. And I was told it was an ancient, well, not ancient's the wrong word, but an old Methodist chapel. It's if you look at the drawings, it shows you how the parking will be. But before I say that, I believe that this started to be a religious area in 1828. The last service was in 1920, and I believe it was used as a garage around about 1980. But there was a massive gap between 1920 and 1980, so it's been used as a sort of repair garage. But now going back to what I said about the drawings, you look at the drawings, you cannot put those cars properly in that parking area without encroaching on the pavement. That means parking on the road. There's already problems parking on the road because of that bend. Another issue where I'm going to bring up, there has been in the past an application 70 or 80 yards away, next to the club. Somebody wants to modify a building at the back of the building, and have an access there. We've already turned that down because it's too dangerous, because there's no splay. I would be concerned that the officers have actually gone against highways. Highways have sent a 5-page report on the fact that this building would be too dangerous for pedestrians to have windows opening out onto the pavement area. There is absolutely no splay. And in fact, I reversed my car. I do realise I got a Land Rover Discovery onto that space the other day and come out, and I was actually had to sit beyond that wall to look up the road. So that's just when I went to review the housing. I find it will change. That building will disappear. It will be changed into such a extent that it would not be as part of what it was part of the village before. And as a result of it, I can't support that. I'm very concerned that highways have said something and we've ignored it, because other areas within this village, we've actually used highways as the holy grail, and we've turned applications down as a result of a highways a recommendation. And if we can't actually have consistency where highways are concerned, do we ignore highways in the future? So in this case, I'm unable to support it, and I would love to see something done with the building, but I cannot see it turned into a house where there'd be 2 or 3 cars parked on the road there on a permanent basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Phillips.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I find it difficult to support this. I must admit, before the site visit, I was quite prepared to support this, and I thought it seems reasonable. But on closer inspection, I just don't feel I can support it. I sort of echo what Councillor Humphreys has said. I was quite surprised just how dangerous I think it would be to be parking vehicles or pulling vehicles off there. I know vehicles do, but a large vehicle or a small vehicle, I just find it, I can't support it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else wish to speak, or anyone wish to propose a motion for the board? Members,
Chair?
Councillor Humphreys.
Yeah, Chair, I'm going to propose that we actually a refusal, and I'm not sure what the number will be, but it is far too dangerous. And also, I'm very concerned about the heritage of that building. It will disappear. So I'd ask Mr. Brown to help me with those numbers if it's possible. Thank you.
Mr. Brown, do you wish to assist Councillor Humphreys?
Concern about highways and parking would come under NW10 because that refers to development considerations. The policy on heritage is NW14, but this is not locally listed. It's not a listed building. It's not in a conservation area, and therefore I could not support a recommendation of refusal based on that policy.
So, Councillor Humphreys, it sounds like policies NW10 and NW12. Is that your proposal? Refusal based on policies NW10 and NW12?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm quite happy to second that. I also went on the site visit, and whilst it would be very nice to see an appropriate development to maintain this building, I think 2 dwellings on this site is just overdevelopment and it is dangerous. So I'm quite happy to support the proposal for refusal.
Thank you very much. Members, if no one else wishes to speak, we'll move to the vote. Mr. Tobin.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the proposal of Councillor Humphreys to refuse on the basis of policies NW10 and NW12. Councillor Bell.
4.
Councillor Clues.
4.
Councillor Downs.
4.
Councillor Hayfield.
4.
Councillor Humphreys.
4.
Councillor Jarvis.
4.
Councillor Vees.
4.
Councillor MacDonald.
4.
Councillor Mawson.
4.
Councillor Moss.
4.
Councillor Parsons.
4.
Councillor Phillips.
4.
Councillor Simpson.
4. So, members, that by my math says that planning permission is refused. We now move on to application number 245 for land to the rear of 50 New Street, Dord. Mr. Owen Carvalho has indicated that he would wish to speak. Mr. Carvalho, if you could stand by whilst Mr. Brown introduces his report. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is a deferred item allowing members to visit the site individually, and the report just updates from where we are as a result of the last meeting. So to remind members of the plans, then clearly here you can see the outside, the application site outlined in red, with the access onto New Street towards the left, and the depiction of the elevations, proposed elevations of the house. And that's all I think I need to say, Mr. Chairman. Members have visited the site, and they can. I'll listen to what they have to say.
So, Mr. Carvalho, welcome to the meeting.
Good evening.
Mr. Tobin. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Carvalho. In a moment, you'll be given 3 minutes in which to address the board. I will tell you when your time starts, and I shall also remind you when you have 1 minute remaining. Okay. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Good evening. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak today and for all your vote for site visit on the last board meeting. I'll address the main concerns raised by the planning officer, namely urban design and highway safety. On design, the bungalow would be situated at the rear gardens of Terrace House in Long Street and New Street, it will not be visible and will not impact on the terrace character of these streets. The planning department has already approved the areas behind the co-op to build 12 houses. Thus, the historic pattern of separation between the two streets will in any case be destroyed by this more intensive residential development. The description of this bungalow as being shoehorned into the site is rather unfair, given how many new houses are going to be built to the rear of the co-op. The planning officers state that the bungalow at 18 New Street was under a different policy regime, and policy regime has changed since then. In reality, the proposed bungalow is sympathetic to the existing historical local character of bungalow at 18 New Street and others in Dordon Village. On highways states that the development should only be refused on highway grounds where impact on highway safety or residual cumulative impact of the schemes are severe. I maintain that the impact of the scheme is not so severe that refusal is justified for the following reasons. It's unfair considering in 2013, planning was granted when previous owner of 61 Long Street split the house into two dwellings, which shares the same drive and access to New Street where the new bungalow is being built. Highways did not object to raise the same safety concern then on limited visibility at the access onto New Street and others, which is now burdened onto our application. Highway authorities has already drawn a white line to allow easy access and exit from our drive into New Street. The distance between these lines is 5 meters. We have already provided photographic evidence. There is ample space for parking.
1 minute remaining.
Vehicle maneuvering. Unlike the co-residential development, this single building would not intensify current use of this driveway, nor would it cause more congestion in New Street. This is a private drive. Vehicles and pedestrians currently use the access, so when the new bungalow is built, this will not increase the traffic flow. In fact, there would be a 0% increase as it's already in existing use. We use this drive on a daily basis to exit from our garage and drive into New Street from the proposed site. In conclusion, I request you to approve this planning application and allow my wife, family, and I can realize our long-term dream to build a lovely new home in Dordon. Finally, I would like to thank Andrew Vaughan from Planning, Councillor Jackie Chambers, and Andy Wright for their time and support. Thanks once again for all your time, which is much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carvalho. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? In which case, as there are no questions, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Carvalho. Members, we now move on to consideration of the application. Who would wish to speak first? Councillor Mawson. I think you're still muted, Councillor Mawson. You're still showing me as muted, Councillor Mawson.
Is it back on now?
It is now, yes.
Yeah, it went off on its own. I'll just start again and saying that I've lived in Dordon for over 60 years, and I know New Street quite well. The problems associated with it, but not necessarily with road crash or pedestrian accidents. To my knowledge, there's been none. And there's various access down that road that people come out into New Street, and they come out quite well because they're aware of the danger that's there. As for delivery wagons and tackle there, they always park in the road anyway, outside, wherever it is. And to be perfectly honest with you, I see no reason why we should refuse him. Because, like I say, he's building a house in Dordon for him and his family. And I do know that further up the street, there was another bungalow coming out an access at the top there, which is just as dangerous because it's right on the junction, which it is not. So I'll just, what's the name? I can't go along with this, and I would like to move that we grant permission. with highways as well. Can I just comment as well on highways? At our last meeting, we granted permission and went against the highways for building an office in Addiston.
Thank you, Councillor Mawson. Councillor Phillips.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to support Councillor Mawson. I visited the site not long ago. Well, it's for Saturday, just after the other site visit, and yeah, I couldn't see the great dangers. Now, and as Councillor Mawson alluded to, there's another bungalow built at the back further up, and it doesn't seem to be logical to build one and dismiss another. So I'm quite happy to support, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Mr. Brown, anything to add at this stage?
No, Mr. Chairman. All the planning arguments from our point of view are contained in the initial report.
Thank you very much. Members, would anybody else wish to speak? I have to say, members, I do have personally concerns over this application. I hear the point that other houses have been consented and built, but without doubt, we have to take every application on its merits. And looking at the site, and I walked along a couple of weeks ago now to see the access way. It is very difficult, I thought, to see out and to enter and exit the site safely. So personally, you know, I don't have the local knowledge of the local members, but I thought this was dangerous. We had another site a while ago that we granted consent for, but that was a single access site rather than a multiple access site. So I guess I can see both sides of this application, but my instinct, I have to say, is that I'm happier with the officer's recommendation than with consent. So personally, I propose refusal for the reasons stated in the report. Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Mawson, do you wish to speak again?
Just to say that I wish members would support it, because it's very little we have happened in Dordon, and it's just nice to know that somebody really wants to live in Dordon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to speak? In which case, we've had one proposal for the application to be granted, which was seconded, and mine for refusal, which was not. So we'll move to a vote on Councillor Mawson's proposal that consent is granted. Can I see that? Mr. Tobin, could you take a vote, please?
Chair, just to be absolutely clear on the reasons being advanced for granting permission, because I'm not sure I got those fully. Given the detailed reasons we have for the officer's recommendation in the report, we need to be clear that we are that any decision is, if it's to go against that, clearly sets out the basis for doing so. And I'm not sure, though I heard what Councillor Mawson said, I'm not sure specifically the grounds that he wants to advance for that. We'd need to record those in any decision.
Councillor Mawson, I think I heard you say that you attach different weight to the issues identified in the report, and you perceived the property to be within the development boundary. Were there other reasons as well?
That's correct, and also about the highways as well.
Thank you. Mr. Tobin, does that give you what you needed?
Thank you, Chair. That's some more information. Thank you. So that's for the vote then for Councillor Mawson's recommendation to grant on those three grounds he just set out. Okay, Councillor Bell.
Against.
Councillor Clues.
Against.
Councillor Downs,
4.
Councillor Hayfield,
4.
Councillor Humphreys,
Against.
Councillor Jarvis,
Against.
Councillor Lees,
Against.
Councillor MacDonald,
Against.
Councillor Mawson,
4.
Councillor Moss,
Against.
Councillor Parsons,
4.
thank you, Councillor Phillips,
4.
Councillor Simpson.
Against.
Chair, I make that 5 votes in favour and 8 votes against.
Thank you very much. So, members, we've now taken a decision to vote against a recommendation of granting consent. To regularise the position, we need to have a proposal that planning permission is refused. Do we have a proposer for that?
I'll propose that. I thought that was actually written in the report.
It is. So the reasons for refusal are as per the report. So, members, Councillor Humphreys has proposed refusal, and I will second that motion. Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Mawson.
It's okay. I've left my hand up, so I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. So, Mr. Tobin, could we take another vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is a vote for the officer's recommendation on page 5268 of the report. Councillor Bell.
4.
Councillor Clues.
4.
Councillor Downs.
Against.
Councillor Hayfield.
Abstain.
Councillor Humphreys.
4.
Councillor Jarvis.
4.
Councillor Lees.
4.
Councillor MacDonald.
4.
Councillor Mawson.
Against.
Councillor Moss.
4.
Councillor Parsons.
Against.
Councillor Phillips.
Against.
Councillor Simpson.
4.
Chair, I'll make that. That's 8 for, 4 against and 1 abstention.
Thank you, Mr. Tobin. So, planning permission is refused. Members, we now move on to application number 341 for land adjacent to the Lodge, Tamworth Road, Cliff. Mr. Brown.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me run through the slides so that members can be familiar with the site if they're not already. Kingsbury is about 1.5 kilometres to the south of this particular plan, with the Tamworth Road coming from Kingsbury over the M42 up towards Dost Hill, and the site, as you can see, is on the left-hand side, just north of the residential property known as the Lodge. On the far left-hand side of the plan is a wooded area, and beyond which is the River Tame. The planning application, as you can see, is for the single pitch on to the north of, and then an access which has been actually added in, as you can see there on the report, or on the plan, I beg your pardon. You can see the single pitch there surrounded by landscaping. The existing pitch on the site, which is referred to in the committee report, is on the southern side of that access, closer to the Lodge. So the intention is to move the pitch from the southern front of that site to the other side of the access, as you can see there. I do need to point out, Mr. Chairman, there are changes to this application from the previous ones that members have considered. Those changes are actually outlined in the report in some detail. It's a reduced scale, as for the fact reasons that indicated in the report. And the applicant has drawn attention to a 2019 Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation Assessment, and I'll refer to that as GTAA, 2019 GTA, and also to personal matters. And this is the reason why the third application on this site, can actually be determined rather than it not being determined. That's explained at length in the report, Mr. Chairman, and members should be aware of the changes in this application, particularly since the last appeal decision. This application therefore has to be looked at afresh, and all the elements have to go back into the final planning balance. And it's very possible, very plausible, that the planning board may come to a different decision than the appeal inspector did on the last application. This is a different application, and therefore it should be considered in that particular light. The applicant's letter the applicant has circulated a letter which I sent round to members in the middle of last week, and that letter is in response to the committee report. Whilst the committee report refers to the possibility of a temporary consent here, that letter explains why the applicant considers a temporary consent is necessary here, if the committee is prepared to look at an approval. That particular letter also referred specifically and explicitly to paragraphs in the National Planning Policy Guidance. And I did circulate those then later so that members could see the actual paragraph number which the applicant was referring to. And the applicant is quite right in that a temporary consent can be considered where it is expected that the planning circumstances will change in a particular way at the end of the period granted temporary planning commission. The applicant here is saying that because of the 2019 GTA, there may well be changes to proposals in the emerging local plan for Gypsy and Traveller accommodation, and therefore that a temporary accommodation in this particular, temporary permission in this particular case will be a proportionate and reasonable response to that situation. That has to be given weight, Mr. Chairman. I can't ignore that, and I have to advise you that that has to be given weight. And the members, rather than consider an automatic refusal, they should not do that because it's a changed application. But on the other hand, they should also review the possibility of a temporary consent in this particular matter. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. Councillor Andy Jens has indicated as a local member who would like to speak. So, Councillor Jens.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak on this. Again, I'll be brief. I simply wish to support the officer recommendation that you refuse this application. I appreciate there are a number of issues to consider here, but I personally don't think any of the other considerations outweigh the important greenbelt consideration. I've heard from many residents concerning this. I've heard from many residents concerning this application, and I'm sure my fellow Councillor Brian Moss has as well. And I can say that overwhelmingly the feeling locally is that the narrow stretch of green space between this part of North Warwickshire and Dosthill and the rest of Tamworth is considered to be really precious, and that it should be preserved. As Mr. Brown just said, there's been two previous applications on this site, and they've both been refused by this board, and both those decisions have been upheld by the planning inspector. I appreciate that some of the conditions have changed, but I personally don't think that the difference is that significant, and I ask the board to be consistent and to again turn this application down on greenbelt considerations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jens. Members, who else would like to speak? Councillor Moss.
Thank you, Chairman. I couldn't have written it better myself than Councillor Jens. I agree. It's greenbelt land, and that is my principal reason for objecting.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Members, I'm sorry, I omitted to draw your attention to the additional information and guidance that Mr. Brown referred to in his report. Given the status of the application, it really is important that everyone has cognizance of the guidance that was provided by email. Ordinarily, if we're all in the room together, I'd ask you to signify that you'd read it. But given the changed nature of our meetings and being over the line, a virtual meeting, I'd just be grateful if anybody who hasn't had the opportunity to read that report and understand the guidance could indicate that. If no one does, then I will take it that we've all read it. Councillor Mawson.
Sorry, I was indicating I wanted to speak on the motion.
Oh, no, absolutely. I took that, Councillor Mawson. I saw your hand beforehand, so I understood, but apologies if I confused you.
Thank you.
But over to you, Councillor Mawson.
You're right. Yeah. I'm not au fait with technology. I thought I was, but I'm not. But just to say that Councillor Jevons actually we gave a very good report, I thought, and we need to be consistent in things that we do. And I'll move the motion for refusal.
Thank you very much. And any other members wish to speak? Councillor Bell.
Yes, Chairman. I would like to say, in response to Mr. Brown's suggestion that we look at temporary permission, like the other speakers, my main concern are greenbelt issues, and that's not likely to change. So for that reason, I would support the refusal as recommended.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak or propose an alternative motion? If not, members will move to the vote. Mr. Tobin.
Thank you, Chair. This is a vote on the the recommendation in the report as proposed by Councillor Mawson, seconded by Councillor Bell. Councillor Bell.
4.
Councillor Clues.
4.
Councillor Downs.
4.
Councillor Hayfield.
4.
Councillor Humphreys.
4.
Councillor Jarvis.
4.
Councillor Lees.
4.
Councillor MacDonald.
4.
Councillor Mawson. Councillor Mawson, I think you're on mute still.
Yeah. 4. Sorry, I pressed the wrong button again.
Thank you. Councillor Moss.
4.
Councillor Parsons.
4.
Councillor Phillips.
4.
And Councillor Simpson.
4.
So 13 votes in favour, Chair.
Thank you very much, members. So planning permission is refused. We now move to application number 348 for 1 and 2 Nightingale Cottages, Tamworth Road, Nether Whittaker. Mrs. Helen Lloyd has indicated that she would like to speak. So, Mrs. Lloyd, if you could stand by while Mr. Brown introduces his report. Mr. Brown.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is an item which was deferred from the last meeting, and a site visit was undertaken. So I'll just bring members up to date and remind them of the plans. Then the 2 cottages, as members can see there, facing the road. In terms of the site visit, then the members that went on the site visit looked at the rear elevations of both numbers 1 and 2 there, and also the side elevations on the left and right of the pair of cottages, and they also went into the ground floors of both cottages. Proposed extensions are shown there on the plan. Different proposals for the different cottages. Again, members that went on the site visit will recognise this. This is number 1, and you can see the extension there at the bottom of the coloured picture at the bottom. And then on the opposite side, the left-hand side, the shape of that extension, the side elevation is top right, where you can see the extension, and then the rear elevations, in fact, of number 1 and number 2, are top right, as you can see there. And that's the image I think members took with them when they looked around the site at the site visit on Saturday. You can see the extension there to number 1, and then number 2 is that particular image. As you can see again, it fits in with by the cat slide roof on the left-hand side of the cottage. 2 lantern lights at the top, as you can see there. And these are photographs which the applicants have provided, and members that went on the site visit will recognise those 2 particular scenes from the rear elevation. I've got nothing further to add, Mr. Chairman. I'll leave it to members now.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Brown. Mrs. Lloyd, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you.
Mr. Tobin.
Good evening, Mrs. Lloyd. In a moment, you'll be given 3 minutes in which to address the board. I'll tell you when your time starts, and then I'll also give you a reminder when you have 1 minute remaining. Okay, thank you. Your time starts now.
Thank you. As said, my name is Helen Lloyd, and I live at number 1 Nightingale Cottage with my husband Gwyn and our daughter Katie, and our next door neighbours at number 2 are Peter and Alison Howard. We wanted to thank you all for coming out to visit our property on Saturday, especially on such a wet and miserable day. Our application is to build a ground floor dining room, family room onto each of our houses, and the new rooms will be used as family space and dining and entertaining space. Also, with COVID changing the way people live, this has only increased the need for the additional space as we are working from home often. Following on from your visit, we just wanted to emphasise that the extensions will be completely sympathetic to the age and the significance of the properties. We don't intend to alter or change the structure of the exterior of the existing building, and this will always remain clearly visible in the new rooms. As you have now also seen the internal space in both properties, we hope that you can see that our present accommodation lacks dining space and warrants these new rooms to allow for modern family living. We've been in discussion, as you know, for some years now with the council regarding this extension, and we feel that the scheme you have been presented with provides the perfect balance between the need for space and being mindful of the inherent style and age of the building. We hope that you can see that we care about the building and that take our responsibilities as custodians seriously. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chairman. Mrs. Lloyd, should this be approved and the structures built, in terms of attaching them to the house, what sort of damage may be done to the current structures in doing that?
We don't think there would be any damage to the original structure.
How in what way will it be attached, or would it have to be keyed into timber or whatever, brickwork or what?
No, our understanding is that it would be a glass, so it would be free from the existing building.
A glass attachment.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Members, anyone else have any questions? In which case, Mrs. Lloyd, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, who would like to start the debate? Councillor Bell.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I mean, generally speaking, I'm really protective of our historic and listed buildings. And I think actually in this case, we're being a little overprotective. I really do think that what is being proposed here is reasonable. I mean, there is always a balance between preserving our lovely buildings, and certainly this is a lovely building, and making them fit for modern living. And if we don't make them fit for modern living, these buildings will not be used and they will deteriorate. So I am really sympathetic with this application. I do think, particularly as the structures that are proposed are basically wood and glass, that if in the future it was felt they need not to be there, they can be easily removed. And as the applicant has just said, the actual structure of the building as it looks is not going to be changed. It's not going to be plastered over or anything. We did ask those questions when we were there on the site visit. And so the integrity of the building will be maintained, and all the proposed development is at the rear of the building, so it won't affect how it's seen from the road or from the front at all. I think, and I do think, we were a little bit concerned about where it would be attached to the building. We thought it was an old wooden beam, which turned out to be a concrete beam, which had been very, very carefully disguised to look like the other beams. So actually, we're a little bit more reassured on that. So from my point of view, we did go in the cottages. They are charming, but they are very small for modern living and the way people want to live today. And I am, as I say, very sympathetic towards this. And Chairman, I would like to propose that we actually approve this application.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Hayfield.
I didn't attend the site meeting, but I have known these cottages for many, many years. I'll happily second Councillor Bell's thing. I think it's possible to take an older building and put a relatively modern looking extension on, and it looks quite good. I've seen it happen all over the place. So I do have a lot of sympathy for this, and I will happily second approval.
Councillor Bell and Councillor Hayfield, I'm sure you know what's coming. Mr. Tobin will need a reason for your recommendation. If you could consider that whilst we carry on with the debate. Councillor Phillips.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I too am sympathetic to this. I was concerned that the structure may have been damaged or I know it'd be obscured, but it's not. I'm satisfied that if it's not going to be plastered over and destroyed, and we're not going to be keyed into it, I'm quite happy to support the building of it. Such or the recommendation that's just been put forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lees, did you indicate you wish to speak or?
I did, Chair, but Councillor Bell said what I wanted to, but I'll just reiterate that most of the beams at the back of the house, and some of those beams are quite thick, are actually concrete beams. So they have been put in fairly recent to the building itself. So I don't think the structure will suffer at all from any building to it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I think this has been done very tastefully. It is subservient to the main building, and it looks to be a very valid way of increasing the footprint of the existing cottages to accommodate modern living. So I'd be happy to see this planning application approved.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hayfield, did I see your hand again?
Only in terms of reasoning, Chairman. I could be flippant and say the reasoning is simply because I like it. But if I was trying to be a little less flippant, I would say that I believe it does no harm to the setting of the listed building. And in fact, I think it's quite possible for a modern looking extension or to blend in quite nicely. As I say, I've seen it happen elsewhere. I can't quote you absolute numbers, but I seem to be in tune with most other members of the board is simply saying I like it.
So, Councillor Hayfield, I think I heard you say that you, in your opinion, the level of weight to be given to the suspected harm is different to as recorded in the planning officer's report, and you perceive that this application is in line with our development plans particularly ENV 10.
Do you know, I couldn't have said it better myself, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hayfield. Does anyone else have any other comments? In which case, sorry, Councillor Jarvis, were you wishing to speak again, or is that? Nope. In which case, Mr. Tobin is being proposed and seconded for consent. Could you take a vote, please?
Chair, just to be clear in terms of reasons for the proposal, it seems to be based on the perceived level of harm, which I think is dealt with at page 5312 of the report, paragraph B3. So I take it that the suggested reason is that the any harm is offset by the public benefit of the proposed development. Is that what is effectively
yes,
being
said? I
said?
think members were saying that they disagreed with the level of harm, and they perceive that the harm that may be created to the building is offset by the fact it is potentially removable, and that the structure that's to be approved, if the vote is granted, will not be keyed into the building and will be fixed by a flexible method of attachment. So the structure is there, and the level of harm is less than would be otherwise perceived.
Thank you, Chair.
Members, if I got that wrong, please do shout.
No, that's very, very good, Chair.
Thank you. So votes for grant on that basis. Councillor Bell.
4.
Councillor Clues.
4.
Councillor Downs.
4.
Councillor Hayfield.
4.
Councillor Humphreys.
4.
Councillor Jarvis.
4.
Councillor Lees.
4.
Councillor MacDonald.
4.
Councillor Mawson.
4.
Councillor Moss.
4.
Councillor Parsons.
4.
Councillor Phillips.
4.
Councillor Simpson.
4.
So 13 votes for Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, members. So plan permission is granted. We now move on to agenda item number 6, which is planning consultation. Mr. Brown, anything to add to your report?
Not really, Mr. Chairman. As you can see here, the planning white paper and the additional consultation papers were reported to the Executive Board and to the Local Development Framework Subcommittee before coming here. And members will know that those two particular boards resolved to take action. In terms of the white paper, then the Executive Board and LDF Group have said that, as you can see from the recommendation, that they've asked members to make their comments made known to various other members, who will then agree a response with the Chief Executive and officers in order to be sent to the government to meet the deadlines. And I think, Mr. Chairman, that recommendation should follow again tonight, and that if members of the Planning Board, once they've considered the planning consultation white paper in detail, if they want to get their comments back to me or to Dorothy Barrett, then we'll collate them with the comments that have already come in from Exec Board members and from the LDF Group, and to provide a draft response to the government in due time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Members, I particularly draw your attention to a couple of sections of the report, particularly section 511, where our officers quite correctly point out that 9 out of 10 applications are approved by local planning authorities. Tonight's performance perhaps being against the national trend. But there are permissions for 1 million unbuilt homes. And perhaps the issue really is on the supply side rather than the consent side. I have significant concerns about some sections of this proposal. There are some items of government's proposal which actually I think are very positive and are worth considering. You know, bringing a new focus to design and sustainability is excellent and really should be where we are. Removing some of the confusion between SIL and Section 106 agreements, again, is a very positive move forward. The digitisation of local plans is equally good news for everyone, I think. But like the curate's egg, there is rather more in here that I'm concerned about than I'm in favour of. The move towards a zonal system for areas of England so that it will be simply growth, renewal or protected status concerns me enormously. And in particular, the revised standard method for calculating housing requirement, I think is just truly awful. If you look at the chart on page 6.9, it indicates that we'd have a 48% increase in the number of new homes that we'd have to provide for every year. We've already taken a significant hit in new home development. And I really think that whilst there are some good parts of this application, government has got this wrong and it needs to be reconsidered, shall we say. So I'm personally very happy with the comments that are in the report and the response that's going to be sent, if not beefed up. But I'd welcome anyone else's comments. Who else would like to speak? If you're all in complete agreement with that, I'd move the recommendation. I just need a seconder. Would anyone like to second me?
Councillor Jarvis, second.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tobin, could you take a vote whilst we have unanimity?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bell.
For.
Councillor Clues.
For.
Councillor Downs.
For.
Councillor Hayfield.
For.
Councillor Humphreys.
For.
Councillor Jarvis.
For.
Councillor Lees.
For.
Councillor MacDonald.
For.
Councillor Mawson.
For.
Councillor Moss. Councillor Parsons.
For.
Councillor Phillips.
For.
Councillor Simpson.
For.
Chair, that's 12 votes.
Thank you very much. Members, that's carried. We now move to agenda item number 7 on the Warwickshire Minerals Plan. Anything to add to your report, Mr.
No,
Mayor?
Mr. Chairman. Similarly, this went to the LDF group just a couple of days ago, and the recommendation was followed. Following the last board's hearing of the minerals local plan, the objections which were made by members have been referred to the county. As a consequence of that, a statement of common ground has been agreed, with most of the comments actually agreed, and any outstanding ones will be referred to the examination inspector at the appropriate time. The LDF group accepted that recommendation, or accepted that situation, and the recommendation here to you tonight, Mr. Chairman, follows exactly the same lines.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Members, any comments? If not, I'll move that the recommendation be accepted. Do I have a seconder?
Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Councillor Jarvis. Mr. Tobin, could you take a vote?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bell.
For.
Councillor Clues.
For.
Councillor Downs.
For.
Councillor Hayfield.
For.
Councillor Humphreys.
For.
Councillor Jarvis.
For.
Councillor Lees.
For.
Councillor MacDonald.
For.
Councillor Mawson.
For.
Councillor Moss, I understand, has left the meeting, Chair. Councillor Parsons.
4,
Councillor Phillips,
4,
Councillor Simpson.
4. That's carried. Thank you very much, members. Thank you very much indeed for your attendance and forbearance with tonight's meeting. I was going to thank in particular Councillor Mawson for being here, given the fact that he was in Poland, but it looks like we've lost the satellite link, as every good organisation would. I'm also delighted to say that it's just about 8:30, so the virtual chip shop is still open, and wish you all a good evening. Thank you very much.
Councillor Simpson, it's very nice in Poland, I can assure you.
I can still see it.
It's a long time since I was there, and